Hey folks, it's Chris with the Human Project Podcast. We talk a lot about empathy throughout all of our podcast episodes. It's a very important and vital skill for us, especially if we want to connect and be the body of Christ. And at the same time, empathy can have a dark side. Empathy can go bad. We can use it in inappropriate ways. It can be used in inappropriate ways against us. In this episode, Mark and I explore what to watch out for and how not to misuse empathy. Take a listen. Let us know what you think. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Chris.
How are you doing today?
I'm feeling pretty empathetic.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. How about you?
This episode's about empathy.
What? Who knew? I did not see that coming.
Last time it was Mary Poppins. Now it's just skipping straight to it. It's all good. We like to talk about empathy.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
a fair amount.
A favorite topic of ours because it's something that helps build connection, community. It's what we really care about. And I think we've been exploring this topic, like looking at it from the other side of the coin a couple times over the last couple months. And so you posited this as a topic about when empathy can be toxic.
Yeah. When it does, it's kind of like, I picture this Far Side comic.
Oh, I love the Far Side.
Do you remember the one where it's just one frame with the refrigerator and you've got food in it and they've got a stick up. They're holding up other food inside of it and the caption is when food goes bad.
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that one? It's awesome.
I remember the where they were driving through the savannah and there was a lion and he said, "Drive, George, drive. This one's got a coat hanger."
Okay.
Or also my other favorite one was the deer that had the bullseye on it.
Yeah.
And he said, "Bummer of a birthmark, Hal."
Bummer of a birthmark.
Yeah. Those are what I remember. I don't remember when food goes bad.
When food goes bad.
I get it. It's a play on words, like food's expiring.
It's gone bad.
Nice.
Yeah. But like for empathy, we talk about it in glowing terms, and it is certainly very powerful. There's times when it can be unhelpful, which we talk about in our classes as well. Like if somebody's asking for directions, I need to go to the bathroom. This is not the time to be like, so it seems like you're feeling pressure. Just help them find the bathroom. Or if somebody's doing something inappropriate or illegal, it's also not the time for empathy. But this is kind of like even further than that. Not just when it's unhelpful or not the best tool.
When it's evil.
When it actually is costly to use. I thought that was would be a really interesting thing for us to explore a bit.
Yeah, I think it would. I like the idea of talking about that, which is, I guess, why we're talking about it.
As it turns out.
Because we both like the idea of talking about it. That's what makes the cut. When both of us agree this is a good topic
we say,
to
yes,
talk about.
Let's go.
My first introduction to empathy, because I had heard the word a lot as like feeling what somebody's feeling and sympathy and all of those things. And we talk about it as
communicating to the other person that we're trying to be with them.
Yeah. And that's not how I heard it from my business background. I heard it from originally is called tactical empathy, which was from a book on negotiation.
Wait, I'm sorry. What? A book?
Yeah, I know. You actually recommended this book to me.
I did. It's a really good book.
It's a book called Never Split the Difference.
Yeah.
It's by Chris Voss. He's a former FBI hostage negotiator. And I love the book because it has great principles and it's really helped me to be a good negotiator. But he'll talk about tactical empathy of like the goal is just to help the other person feel like you're trying to be with them, which is close to our definition of it. So it's kind of scary. What's the difference there between what good empathy and toxic empathy looks like?
Yeah. And it's a nuanced example you're talking about, but it's also really important nuance, and that's why we want to talk about it here. So we can loop back to tactical empathy and negotiating with hostages, because that is an appropriate thing to do to save lives. But in regular everyday conversations, I would say if we use that kind of approach, that would go over into the category of manipulation, right? When we are trying to use empathy to be with somebody so that they will do something that they wouldn't otherwise want to do, that may perhaps violate some of their ethics or desires, but provide some benefit to us. And the other side of the coin is true also. If somebody is using empathy as a tool in order for us to do something like that, that to me is toxic use of empathy. I'm just trying to make you feel better about me so that you'll give me what I want, or, whatever the case might be.
Kind of like a different variation of like flattering, like the difference between complimenting and flattering.
Right. Yeah. And you can use many of the same words in either of those things, but it's the motive behind them and the outcome that we're seeking in doing it that really is what makes the difference between healthy and toxic versions of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is something that, I mean, look, you go really far. When you go really toxic on this stuff, this is part of how people are groomed for really, really bad behavior, right? Or for dependence on somebody else. The people who do those things often will use empathy as tools in their toolkit in order to get what they're trying to get out of it. And I'm not suggesting that we're doing that in our everyday relationships to that extent, but it certainly can still be a toxic thing for us.
Yeah. That sounds scary. With great power comes great responsibility.
It does.
So how do you handle that? One, how do you handle that yourself so that when you're trying to show empathy, that it's not for the toxic side of things?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm trying to constantly check my motivations. And it's just an ongoing conversation with God. And then in community, which of course we have to bring in. It's the every episode reference to community very appropriately. So that you want to have those, if you like, checks and balances, if I put it in those terms, where I'm asking God to point out to me where I am doing things that are not healthy for myself or the people around me. And I'm also confessing that in community and asking for input if people are seeing something that looks like it might be headed that way. Then I want to hear about it. And I want to be open to that kind of input. So I'm asking myself, what am I trying to get out of this empathy that I'm exhibiting to the other person?
Yeah. Yeah. Am I doing this because I want to show them care? Am I wanting to help them like see something that they need to see versus am I trying to get something out of this?
Yeah. And it's not that those are always mutually exclusive, but if I'm lacking the care for the other person, right, that's where it can be particularly toxic. And it gets all mixed up in our brains too. This is not easy stuff to untangle necessarily, because I feel like, if I feel like I know what's best for you, so I'm just doing this, I'm trying to be empathetic so that, or whatever it might be, so that you do what is best for you, even though you don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
Right.
Yeah.
Now we're really twisted. And that's where it gets dangerous.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about it that way, because I think when we talk about the skill of reflective listening, the goal of empathy is showing people that we care.
Yeah.
Like that's the baseline. It's the foundation that it's on, is showing people that we care. Like that's the goal of us using empathy. Yeah, so when we're doing it for somebody's interest and we have to watch whether it's their best interest, all of that prayerful consideration, I think what it boils down to is disrespectful versus respectful empathy. So we'll talk about warmth, we'll talk about empathy, and then respect. So we need to keep respect at the forefront. What would that look like? Or how would we know that that's not happening?
Yeah. So respect, when we talk about it in class, we're always talking about things that are effectively boundaries. Whose responsibility is kind of the core question. I worded that awkwardly, but that is the core question of it.
What's whose responsibility?
Which part belongs to who?
Who, what, where, and why? Who? He's on first.
Oh, no, you did not go there. If you're responsible for your health, for being healthy, and I am trying to enforce something on you for you to be healthy, that's actually disrespectful to you, because that's yours to own.
Like making me eat salad.
Yeah, if I force-fed you salad, that would be disrespectful to you, as it turns out. Even though you really should. Oh, no, I just said the should word.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like inappropriate taking of ownership for something.
Right.
Yeah.
And so God's given us each responsibilities for things. I want to support, in this example I'm using, I want to support you in your ability to make those decisions to be healthy. And so if I'm stepping over that boundary, that is unhealthy and heads towards toxic.
Yeah. I think that's really good for us looking at that for what we're doing to other people. What about when somebody is practicing weaponized empathy to us? How do we combat that? How do we stop that from happening?
It's a boundaries question again. If we are feeling those boundaries are violated, then we have some choices to make about how we address it. But being explicit about addressing it is probably the first thing as soon as we're aware of it. But let's be honest, we're probably going to be like feeling feels first,
Sure.
right? I'm feeling annoyed. I'm feeling angry. Anger's often one that comes with having our boundaries violated. And then unpacking why am I feeling that, and then realizing maybe the other person is trying to get me to do something, right, in what they're doing, and I'm doubting their motives. So in that case, the best possible thing that I can think to do at that point is to have that explicit conversation with the other person.
Yeah.
When we're in this type of situation, or when this happened, I felt like this because it seemed like you were doing that to me. So I'm wondering how that looks from your perspective. Like, help me see how that looked from your perspective. And because I felt this way, my request would be, hey, can we not do that again? Right? I do not want to go in this direction. So please don't do that again, because that felt to me like you were trying to get me to do that when I don't want to.
So there's a couple parts in that, and I want to break that down just really explicitly, because I don't think we've talked about boundaries before on an episode.
That would be shocking.
So yeah, I think it'd be good to break it down into a couple things. One is have a conversation.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to get around it if you want to maintain a relationship with this person.
Right.
You need to have the conversation. And one is say, here's what I saw from my perspective. Here's what it did. It's part 2. Here's what I saw from my perspective, part 1. Here's what it did, part 2. Part 3 is asking invitation, asking for a dialogue of let's explore that together. Is this intent? Is that, what's your perspective on
Let
that?
me see what it looks like from where you were at.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then making a request.
Yep. It's part 4.
Yeah. Being really clear about it. This is my boundary. Let me be clearer about that so that we don't have a misunderstanding.
Yeah. And so that's a way to invite that, stop that from happening. And if it does, then it's all the stuff we've talked about with conflict, of showing that there's a discrepancy. Hey, here's what I asked for. Here's what you agreed to. Right. Here's what's happening. Like, let's talk about this.
Yeah. And if that continues, that they continue to violate your boundaries, you have a choice at that point, whether to continue in that relationship or whether you need to put up stronger, firmer boundaries to create some space between you and the other person, because it is unhealthy and it's toxic to you, perhaps.
Yep. Is there any other way of getting around that besides having a conversation for somebody that's practicing weaponized empathy to you?
Run away.
Run away.
And I say that, it sounds joking, and I am half joking in it, right? I mean, I certainly hope that there aren't many circumstances where that is the best answer. And yet there are still some people who are trying to take advantage of and manipulate us.
Yeah.
And at that point, it may be our best option just to simply not be with that person. Another angle or perspective on this is, even if the other person isn't trying to manipulate us, isn't using weaponized empathy, if we're in a relationship and we are in a spot that is particularly vulnerable at that moment, maybe we don't have the reserves, or we're already triggered. We're already, the amygdala is already going nuts on us. We're not in a safe space in general in that part of our lives. This is probably not the best spot for us to be in to offer something to another person in the form of empathy. That could put us in a place where we are trying to offer a cup of water when we only have 2 drops of water in it to begin with, and we probably need those. So being aware of ourselves and what we have to offer is really important in this too. That can become toxic if we are just constantly offering empathy to others, but we don't have it. We don't have the reserves to do that, because this is meant to be reciprocal. This is relational. It is not just one way. It's not just a pouring into somebody else. It is relationally bidirectional.
I understand the logic for that. I'm questioning whether that's always true, if I need to get that from other people. Like, there's 2 scenarios that come to mind. One is there's a conversation that I am intentionally choosing to be that kind of person for that other person. Like, give empathy without receiving it, because I have empathy given to me from ultimately Jesus, and then a strong community of other people. Like, that's an intentional choice I can make to go there.
Yeah.
Now, would I hope that this person that I'm pouring empathy into and not getting anything back would eventually help me in some way? Or I don't know. Do you understand what my question is?
Thank you for clarifying, because that wasn't my intent to say that between 2 people, it always has to be bidirectional. What I'm trying to say is, for me as a human, it needs to be a complete cycle.
Okay.
Like I need to receive empathy. I need to be able to give empathy. Both of those things are true. Just like a body of water has, a pond has most cases has multiple inputs into it, probably one or more streams plus the rainwater, et cetera, flowing into it. And it's got one or more ways that water flows out of it. It's the same kind of systemic thing that I was referring to. So that's a really good, important clarification. We can choose to sacrifice, right? And to give empathy when we don't receive it, but not if we don't have reserves to do that with. Was my poor attempt at a point there that I'm glad you clarified.
Well, that addressed part one of my concern. The other two is I'm trying to think if there's ever a spot where I am completely depleted.
Yeah.
Because is that a reflection of that I'm not receiving from Jesus what I need to receive? Not welcoming what the overwhelming and abundant gift is that he gives.
In a word, yes.
Yeah.
Also, for clarity, when I'm saying that we're empty, I don't just mean of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And I say reserves, I'm talking in a pretty
talking
broad
like
sense.
Physically, energy, all of that stuff.
Exactly. All of that kind of stuff. And the question you asked still applies really well to that. If I'm empty of that, does that mean I'm not receiving what Jesus wants me to have? Yes, because he wants you to be not depleted. He wants you to be healthy and whole. And so as a good provider, he's providing that. If he says things like, the birds of the air aren't worried about this, that means it's available to us.
It's a question of timing, I think. Because if I stop and think about it in a broader sense, thank you for inviting like the whole picture into that. Because Jesus got tired.
Yeah.
There's lots of times that Jesus napped
Right.
and went away and all of that. So okay, cool. That helps answer that question for me.
Yeah, it's a larger. It sounded in my original comment like it was a small context.
Yeah,
but that was not my intent, and I'm glad we explored it because it definitely broadened out further, even in my thinking while we were talking about it.
It's kind of like parking when you are flooded. The word that you use when our amygdala is going fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Yeah,
parking those and saying, let's revisit this conversation and come back to that at a different time.
Right.
So multiple strategies for how we can watch ourselves so that we're not weaponizing empathy.
Yeah.
And also how we can set boundaries when empathy is being weaponized against us.
Yeah.
So that way you're not the bad side of empathy, the dark side of empathy.
When empathy goes bad.
When empathy goes bad tonight on Empathy Cups.
Oh, no. Ratings would be pretty poor for that, I think.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thanks for exploring that with me, buddy. I think it's with how important empathy is and how we talk about it and how much we talk about it, I think it's good to explore what to watch out for on that as well. So thanks for bringing that in as a topic.
Definitely. Way to be healthy. This is how we do it.
Yeah. If that topic sounded interesting to you, you want to dive deeper, you want to learn more, visit our classes or email us at info@humanproject.us to learn more. Hey folks, thanks for tuning in today. Our team is made up of myself, Chris Conlin, and Mark Wavle, and our lead editor is Derek Donley. We're a crowd-funded nonprofit. Our free resources exist because of your generous support. To learn more about us or to check out the classes that we talk about here, visit us at www.humanproject.us. Thanks for joining us on our mission to bring 1 million lives closer to the fullness of God's design.